Okay, I'm live again. So it's now 3:00. So we just had a podcast with Bernard Wozniak from the government department, which was all around data and what else was it? The cyber stuff. It's just some crazy conversations around what they're doing with data from dead people, which I thought was fascinating. Literally, when people die, there's a lot of data that's created, and you have to make sure that it's safe. So kind of cool. This little podcast, this next one, I'm pretty excited about with Dan Bartels from SendPayments. Now, if anyone hasn't heard SendPayments, you've obviously all heard of Air Wallets. Well, SendPayments are right on their tail. I reckon they're going to catch them up this year. And so I just want to introduce Dan as the Chief Commercial Officer. So just at the moment, if Vicky and Christine and Priyanka and Hannah and Maya and our team are watching, I just want to say how proud I am of you all this week. I think we've had a record week of meetings being booked, which is absolutely amazing. The platform is taking off. We've had a record number of payments go through the platform, which is even better. So for everyone that don't know, we've flipped from a manual-based business, which was last year, built a platform, and then on January the 13th this year, we flipped it completely to a SaaS model where salespeople can now pay $50 a month, get access to the Magic platform, and get some matches on their target market, execs they want to go and have a conversation with, and then they can pay as they go and book one meeting, and they can book 5, they can book 10, as much money as they've got. And of course, we give money to charity for every meeting that happens, which is very cool. But so we're now a SaaS platform. I'm excited to have a chat with Dan, so I'm going to bring him on stage. Dan, hello.
How are you, Carl? Good to see you, mate.
Mate, you too. It's Friday, right? And I'm English. Every time Friday comes along, I get this massive urge to get on the piss because because it's Poets' Day. Piss off early tomorrow, Saturday, and so all my life, Friday has been 12:00. Get to the pub. And it really, even today, I'm 54 this year, and I still get that massive urge to go to the pub. And it's stinking hot outside. I'm in Potts Point. It's like,
mate, I'm in Paddington. I just went and grabbed some lunch a bit earlier, and I had exactly the same urge. So, and I thought I've actually got a couple of birthday parties this weekend, and I'm like, if I can just hold off till tomorrow.
That pub up the Five Ways.
It's a good pub, mate. It's a good pub.
Get up there. I fell out of there a few times, mate. Let me tell you. I used to live in Paddington. I used to live up on, just off Glenmore Road, and I spent most of it. In fact, I met my girlfriend up there. Second girlfriend to go. I was with her for 8 years, but I met her up on the dog park up there, up on Glenmore Road, which is I used to walk my dog there every night, and his dog's dead now. But anyway. Who are you, Dan? Let's tell everybody about Dan Bartels and tell us about SendPayments, because it's
Look, mate. Dan Bartels. I've been in sales my entire working career. I've done a bunch of different things. I ran my own business for a while. Got into technology actually via running my own company. We had a national kitchen laundry appliance repair company of all things. Not that you trust me to change a light globe, but that was what we built. And I built it on the Salesforce platform. And that kind of actually started my tech career. I then spent sort of getting towards the end of that business, and someone gave me some good advice that said, when you're going to sell it, unless you want to go with the business, fire yourself and replace yourself in the organization so you don't go with the sale, which I did. I went and joined Salesforce. One of the leaders at Salesforce, a guy called Tony Armfield, who some people may know, sort of around the traps. He's done an entire career in tech in Australia. Joked to me and said, mate, you know more about this than half my sales guys do. Why aren't you working for me? And I said, well, funnily enough, that could be a good conversation. I spent sort of 5-6 years at Salesforce, worked in a bunch of their different teams, and then stepped out into what's now called Satinia, what's called Financial Force. Ran their team with I run a similar podcast to yourself, Carl, with my fellow podcast host, Simon Peterson. We ran that business for sort of 5 or 6 years. Then sent across to Congra, another ISV on the Salesforce platform as well. And then over the last kind of 12 months, I've done a couple of different things, but I've ended up at SendPayments. So where, as you very aptly introduced us to the audience, mate, we are a We're an enterprise FX business. So Australian-based fintech, really about how do we help people facilitate cross-border payments, but how do they do it for their customers and do it at scale? So really facilitating that growth, which is we're in an ever growing global world, right? And people want to trade in any currency, in any area. We've got customers who are small organizations to large organizations, but it really is about how they ingest that. And this is where we kind of differ to people like Airwallets, right? But how do they ingest that into their platform and their business? But no, for me, I've been in sales my entire career and now running the commercial offering across SendPayments and excited about it. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, would have been last year, I dumped all of our banks, sacked them all. And I'll tell you why. I left school at 15, left home at 16. I got no qualifications. I'm just a naive person trying to start something, right? And I think that's probably the reason why Meet Magic's still going, because I haven't got a clue what I'm doing, and naivety wins the day. Because I think if you logically sat down and put a Harvard lens or a PricewaterhouseCoopers lens over what I'm doing, you think you're nuts to do it, because it's starting any business in today's world is crazy, but keeping it going, you've got to be completely nuts. You got to find something, get people to pay for it if they like it, and all that sort of stuff. But I took this little idea of Meet Magic from 2017, where it was just an idea. 2018, I built a website. That was it. It was a ship website. 2019, at the end of 2018, I ran out of money. I had to go and get a job for a whole year again, flogging cybersecurity stuff. And then I kickstarted it just as COVID hit, 2020. Literally, I reinvigorated the whole Meet Magic thing in 2020, and we went from, I think we gave $20,000 away in 2020, and then by the end of COVID in 2022, we'd given over $1 million away through Meet Magic. Crazy, right? Just this little idea. But one of the things that really pissed me off was the fact that the banks were watching this, and the banks keep telling you, "Oh, we got your back, we've got your back," and not a single phone call from any of them saying, "Hey, Carl, I can see your revenue going from $0 to $1 million. I mean, what's going on? Do you need some help?" Those sorts of conversations. I mean, you tell me that you're looking at us as a customer, but you're really not.
Yeah. Mate, I'll tell you a really similar story when I had my company, and this is 15 years ago now. But I laughed because we bought the division of an appliance company that was going broke. We bought their service division for a song, and so I inherited about on a daily basis anywhere between 50 to 100 inbound clients looking to get their appliances repaired. And reasonable cash flow. We were cash flow positive literally on day one, which was amazing. Because we were a brand new business, I went to the bank and said, "Hey, listen, can I get a corporate credit card just to pay stuff?" And this is when debit cards were just coming in. And then we got this great product, the debit card. And I was like, I want to spend your money, not my money. That's fine. And the stupid part about it was, despite the fact that we had in year one over $1 million in net revenue coming through the door and we were profitable, I had a young girl who was working in our contact center who was 18. She was earning maybe $50,000 a year. She could get a $5,000 credit card from the bank, yet my business with $1 million cash turnover and profitable from day one couldn't get a credit card without us signing an agreement that says, as directors, we'll put our house up as collateral for a $5,000 credit card. And I just went, what is that? That's ridiculous. So look, this is where the fintechs are coming into play, right? The banks for so long have just not, and look, they've got a whole bunch of different issues and different problems to deal with. They've got massive organizations. It's like trying to turn a battleship, right? They're building their systems and they're building their processes and upskilling, but they've got different objectives. And this is where, we find and see a lot of customers, not just us, but everybody in the fintech space. People are looking for different parts of innovation. People are looking for different ways of solving problems in their business that just isn't part of what a major bank is trying to build as what their product is. But this is no different to most parts. I mean, if you look at sourcing leads and engaging with senior executives, which is what you do at Meet Magic, right? you've looked at an innovative way of solving that problem while delivering good back to the community, which is amazing. That's not what Gartner care about.
Yeah.
Gartner kind of do a similar thing, right? But it's just not their bag, and they're not interested in the way that you go about it. So I think this is the exciting part that sort of I'm taking the next part of the journey in my career, which is, having worked for some pretty big American corporates for the better part of more than a decade, to really step into some organizations that are trying to innovate. I love the fact that I'm working for an Australian business, I've got to say.
Yeah.
I want to actually build our GDP here locally rather than just see it all kind of go overseas, but actually build some innovation into what we're doing in country, in region, and how we take that to the world. And I'm kind of really inspired by some great organizations, Atlassian, Canva, and others who've built that innovation and taken it to the world. And I think I'm actually inspired by Airwallex as well, to be honest with you. I mean, they've done a phenomenal job, even though I think, as you said, mate, I reckon we're hot on their tails. But look, I think it's healthy competition and inspiration in terms of what can possibly happen.
Totally. Well, I got rid of our banks and went all in on Airwallex. And I said to Lucy, I'm going to dump my bank. What do you think? She didn't recommend it. I said, well, bugger it, I'm going to do it anyway. And I've for 2 years now, everything's been on Airwallex, and if I need to pay somebody in the UK, it's there. It's Singapore, it's there. In the US, it's there. And it just works. I mean, I give the team some virtual digital cards, and then the team can go and buy some stuff, and if they need to, and I can now. I mean, I think the banks are just catching up to this sort of shit. But it's like, so my daughter, little nepo baby up in Brisbane, she's at uni, right? She's got the digital card, and if she ever runs into trouble, with money, she can just go and pay some things. And then one day I saw this $75 Woolworths thing. I thought, I'm not buying your food, and so I just rate limited her card so she can only spend $1. Creativity, right? So I think what Airwallex have done is really put the control back into people with how you want to spend and where you want to spend, and that absolutely. And I love that, and I think there's a whole lot of value that Airwallex is bringing in terms of the subscription models. I think that they're going to come out with. And are you guys going down the same path? Is there something unique that you've got that's
our kind of unique positioning? While Airwallex play in the same space as us, their model is really targeted at an organization like yours, where it's how do you facilitate that internally for yourself. Our positioning really is around organizations who need to facilitate that process for their customers. So it might be, you've got a lot of customers who, in order to buy what you do with them requires international transactions. How do you make that delivery of what it is that you sell, or the projects you run with them, whatever it may be? How do you, a transaction of large ticket items? How do you make that really simple? And how do you deliver that and remove that friction of international transactions? And as far as we're concerned, our best day will be when and we're kind of on the pathway. We've got a couple of clients who are very early in there. I haven't mentioned names because they're very kind of early in their journey, right? But they're delivering that, and our customers actually never know that it was facilitated by SendPayments. It's all just a part of the service that's delivered as part of what their bigger piece. So, it might be, whether it's platforms, it might be trading platforms. Again, it could be the facilitation of large ticket items. Think about selling containers all over the world. If I'm shipping containers, there's transactions, like there's currency transactions on both sides. And in order for you to facilitate the customers, you don't want to run 27 ledgers and 27 currencies. You just want that to be facilitated and easy for your customers. That's the type of customer where we sit. And it is about, for us, how do we look at the enterprise play versus that really traditional play. It's also about facilitation, even in the financial services game. So, we've got a number of organizations we're talking to at the moment who are some of those second and third tier finance services players, where it's, look, we deal in AUD, but our customers need this, and we don't want to go and build that capacity. Can we kind of use your rails to make all this work, and you maintain that and do it at scale for us? So that's kind of where our position is.
That's really cool. I mean, obviously, the thing around technology and leadership here is how do you balance the innovation and risk management around that? I mean, I remember Air Wallets had all sorts of things going on with regulatory and compliance and God knows what. How do you balance all of that by and still ensuring that the platform is stable and secure?
Look, I'd love to say I've got all the answers to that, Carl.
I just thought I'd throw that one in there.
Look, as an organisation, I think if you kind of look at leadership in technology, most problems that tech businesses solve, I'll talk a bit more broadly than just specifically to us, right? And this really goes back to sort of my career, having worked in tech for kind of 15 plus odd years. Most problems that great organizations solve are actually pretty simple problems. Again, if I leverage Canva as an example, Canva solves a really simple problem, which is I need to be creative and I need to have quite quickly and easily sort of good designs. I'm not a designer. That's not who they're targeted at. They might be spreading their wings, but most of their customers are people like you and I who want to be able to do it easily and simply. And behind the scenes, there's obviously a lot of complexity in bits and pieces. And particularly when you step into fintech, there's compliance and issues and things you have to deal with and run at. But most of it is about how do you scale and how do you build your systems to allow customers to become reliable on you. And I actually learned a lot of that from Salesforce. One of my time at Salesforce, one of their key values is about trust. And I find in any business relationship, if you kind of structure your conversations internally and what you're trying to achieve really on that core aspect of our customers are going to expect us and them to be trustworthy. If we build that into kind of what we're doing all the time, then you start to get a really good idea of where you should be spending your time and effort. I think it's down to kind of what I really actually see that you guys deliver in your business, which is people want to engage with people who they trust that they're going to people value that time. They're about to open the door for maybe the organization or references or leads. It wants to be in a trusted environment, and I think if that's in how you operate, whether it's in technology or building process, I think that's what the core piece is inside it.
I think so. You only get. I remember when we first built the platform, or we first went out to market to try and build the platform. I used this agency. I won't mention them, but it was a lot of money we gave them, and their job was to give me the three things that I wanted, which was a platform matching, a matching engine, and a payments piece. And this was the clear deliverables. We got to the end of the sort of the money, and only two of them were delivered, and the other one wasn't. And I was really upset about that because that was fundamentally the SaaS platform is really where it needed to go. But one of the things that really made it bad was they left all the APIs exposed to the public internet. And so you get one chance here in any world, right? You blow trust and you expose anything, you're done. It's pretty much that. So you have to change your name and go incognito. So I mean, how do you cope with that? Because that's another thing, right? You've got the trust factor is really huge, but then of course you've got all the future stuff that's coming out, emerging technologies that you're going to have to deliver. So you got these, I don't think about, for example, the execs that are on the platform now that are maybe baby boomer generation or my Gen X. I think about the generation Zs that in the next 5 years will be in the leadership roles and 10 years will be in the leadership roles. So are you doing the same thing? Are you 10 years down the track in terms of the futures?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think any good organization today is really starting to talk about what happens not just next in their market or in their customers' markets, but sort of really talking about sort of that 5 to 10 year pathway of where does all this go to? Yeah. Everybody, wants to see growth, and that's how companies are valued. But the revenue of your organization is reflective of the value you give to your customers. The valuation that the share market or investors give is representative of where they see things moving to next. And I think underneath that there is a key piece of you've got to be able to learn to leverage where technology is going. Like everyone talks about what AI is going to do to markets. In terms of in the finance model, it's what is crypto and blockchain going to do to the marketplace? But I actually see it being a much simpler problem. It's about integration of technologies. The banking world in itself is pretty archaic, actually, in terms of where most of its systems and platforms are.
Big time.
So one of the biggest challenge in fintechs is most of us still, whether it's an organization or a consumer, most of us still transact more often than not with a pretty archaic organization. So, we've got to think about how do we actually put money in accounts that are pretty poor. I mean, if you look at different markets, the biggest opportunity market in the world is the US. The US finance market is like back in 1972. They still use checks. I haven't had a checkbook in 25 years. ACH payments kind of drive their model, which is all still based on the old check model, right? And that's their number one payment model. So, and this is what's kind of driving players like Stripe and others in the payment space, which is that leadership in technology. How do you make these things simple and seamless? Different way. And if you talk about payments in particular, breaking what we all used to use a credit card. Now it's all about, can I pay in 4 payments in small increments? And there's a whole bunch of, implications of that in the market and for consumers around what that means and how they balance it. But yeah, I think it's all really about, how do we look not just for the next iterative change, but 2 or 3 iterative changes beyond that and the different variations.
I mean, I think about the kids, right? Because they use technology in such different ways than us. Unfortunately, you've got old people designing technology for people that are going to be 10 years down the track, and they're missing the point, completely missing the point. Kids don't care about security. They do not care. They put their shit on the online. They do not care about what's going out there, which is kind of bizarre. But that's because we sort of imposing all of our fears and stuff onto them, and that's what we often go off and build. We build things that we think we should. The old classic that if somebody have asked Henry Ford what their customers, if Henry Ford would have asked his customers what they want, they probably would have said a faster horse. And you didn't build a faster horse, you built a car. One of the things I think about, for example, is all these leaders in innovation that are all over LinkedIn and talking about government trends and innovation in the way they use technology. These government apps that are all over our phone now tracking us. But one of the things that they didn't realize was an unsuspected use case, which the kids were actually doing at school. So the kids would basically get their New South Wales app when they were 16, 17. And the 16 and 17-year-olds can't go into the clubs because they're not 18 yet.
Yep.
And so they were selling them. And so you'd have an 18-year-old who's got a New South Wales app selling it for $70 for use for the night, along with their Instagram profile to get into the club. And all you had to do was just look a little bit light. So if you're blonde hair, blue eyed, you'd be blonde hair, blue eyed on the pictures, because the bouncers don't check that detail. They just look and see if it's roughly the same. And so for $70, 16-year-olds have got somebody else's Service New South Wales app on their Instagram, and they're getting into the club. That use case, all day long, all over every school, all doing it. But no one's talking about that. That's a massive security problem. If everyone's, but no one's thinking about that. So I'm curious about what the payments companies are going to go. How are these kids actually going to use it? Because they might be using it for reasons and ways that we're not even thinking about yet. Have you guys thought around that?
Look, there's a lot of compliance, and I say, look, identification of individuals, particularly in FX payments, is a real challenge. AUSTRAC, that's the government body for those international sort of drive the compliance model that we have to look at. And there's some concepts around know your customer, KYC they call it in finance, and there's some anti-money laundering challenges have to deal with. But I think when you look more widely in kind of the challenge that you're talking about, there's a lot for us to learn, particularly in Australia. about how things are being done internationally. Look, we're a small market in Australia. Yes, we're very, very innovative. Often we do sort of lead the charge on the uptake of lots of types of technology. We, from a banking perspective, we sort of took contactless payments far faster than they did in Europe, etc. But if you look at some of Asia, they've now really moved into sort of single app environments. So if you kind of look at Grab and Line, etc., like they've really looked at. So for those who haven't used it in Asia, it's almost like Uber when you can buy anything. And payments and shopping integrated into your WhatsApp experience. Yep. So that's an expansion of kind of how future trends, we can see where people are going in these areas. But then there's also technology that's adding to that piece around how do we identify people more than we could before? But then there's also some ethical issues and questions around that. Do I want the government to know about where I am all the time and what I'm buying? So there's some philosophical pushback on those types of issues as well. Yeah. When we all sort of went into lockdown under COVID and all of a sudden everything you're doing, I mean, that was one of the key drivers for the uptake of contactless payments across the world, was we all didn't want to be passing our cards backwards and forwards. So contactless became a really key part of that. But it also drove the significant uptick of online shopping. If you look at the trend of payments driven by people who no longer go to the supermarket and just get it delivered from Coles and Woolworths in Australia, not because it's cheaper or it's not even cheaper, but now they've got to the point where it's 20-minute delivery. Well, like, to talk about that 5 years ago, there's no way we'd get to the scale. We did it in such a rapid period of time because behaviour's changed. Yeah. So I think this is where you kind of the core behaviour of individuals drive what happens at an organisation and drives what people want to engage in next. I mean, the one that I get more concerned about is, what's the implication of how fast AI is going to drive us next? And how many of those things will my information now be sitting in that is being constantly looked at by AI on different methodologies? But I mean, I use all that stuff all the time myself on a daily basis. So how do I kind of balance out that from an organizational perspective when we start to talk to our prospects and customers? We're talking internally from product around what we're going to build and develop and where we think this market's going to move. We want to beat our competitors. Where do we find kind of our subset of we're going to be the best at this particular section? How do we kind of manage all those things? I think that's the key challenge I think about. I think
there's so many great things happening in the fintech space. Yeah. One of my advisors, mates, I got drunk with him at the Munich Beer Festival. He actually saved my life because I was so drunk I couldn't even get on the plane. His name's Sean O'Donoghue. He's the CFO of Cuscal, and we'll tell about that story. I think he often tells a story. I was that drunk I was trying to pay the taxi driver with my hotel room key, and I was 3 sheets to the wind. But he's kind of inspiring because he was the one that created the 86400 app. Yeah, which got flogged off to I use it now still as Ubank, but
to Ubank.
He basically built the business case, raised the money, got the thing built, divested it, the whole thing. And he's doing the same thing with another one now. But I look at what they've done in terms of driving innovation in the market. It's incredible. The whole Osco thing has transformed the way you get payments now, and it's really. I get really frustrated if I pay something between banks and it's taking overnight. I find it. Yeah. In fact, there's one thing that, help me understand this. There's one thing that frustrates me about Airwallex, and that is that if I do the wages on a Sunday and I click pay, it doesn't go until Tuesday or late Monday. Why is that?
Is it an international transfer?
No, or local.
Look, it could be part of, again, I'm not an expert on Airwallex by any measure. It may be just part of their compliance process in terms of the quantity of payments, particularly when you're using what we talk about internally being rails. there are different sort of type of rules you have to comply with, and this kind of goes back to one of the things that I've learned in my technology career. Because I definitely want to comment on sort of what Airwalk's rules are or not. But it's so easy sometimes for organizations to end up with tool X. And they end up using it, and they planned it for a particular problem, and then all of a sudden they start pushing things into it to do something else. Back in my ERP days at Financial Force, we would regularly come across customers who started off using Xero as a finance system, and they brought it to the fact that it takes them 2, 3, 4 weeks to close their books at end of month. Why? Because I've now got 12 instances of Xero running, because Xero's only designed to run for a single currency or for a single company. And as we grew and expanded, it was really simple and it's cheap and only costs us $2,000 per company. But it's taking me $150,000 in people time and accountants and assistant accountants just to close my books. And I want to go and raise money next year. I want to go investors, and they're always asking for accurate numbers. I've kind of got them, but are they real? We haven't balanced the books yet. And it just takes time. So what do I go and spend money on? Do I spend money on a better analytics solution? Or do I go and spend money buying a new ERP system that allows me multi-ledger and multi-currency and all that type of stuff? And every company has got different problems for different issues, different solutions for different issues. But that becomes a really key piece around how do you solve problems and use the right tool for the right job.
Yeah, I think about the kids. I'm trying to think of her name. There's a young Vietnamese girl in Australia, and is it Natalie? She's got a new app that allows kids to track their spending and
Look, there's a bunch of those kicking around the market at the moment. So, but I mean that's a key one. Like I've got my daughter using the Spriggy product, which is amazing. So that allows her to have, as a child, my daughter's only 11, year 7 of high school, but she's had it for a couple of years now. She's got a little FPOS card. I can transfer money sort of to that. So she goes down the shops with her girlfriends and wants to have, give me some independence, Dad. I can easily track some money. I can manage on that, the fact that she's got a couple of jobs to earn some pocket money. And in all fairness, I'm lucky if I've got $50 in my wallet at any point in time, because again, I've gone contactless. Yeah. So how do I manage that experience for her? And she doesn't want cash. She wants to follow what everybody else is doing. So in order to be able to teach kind of that process of saving or using the finance system, like that's amazing. And I know now at schools they're teaching kids as in sort of year 3, 4, and 5 to how do you actually a couple of programs they use to do it in primary schools now, which is around teaching them to make some investment decisions, or teaching them, do you want to spend the money now or save the money towards the end of the term, and how does all this work? And it's all built inside a computer program, but it's about how do they learn what is finance. There are plenty of adults that need to learn that, right?
Exactly. I think it was Caroline Tran. I was trying to remember her name, but Caroline, she's a co-founder of Hello Clever, which is. It's a fintech company that I think is empowering e-commerce businesses. They've got a real-time payments platform, basically, with, I think it's got built-in instant cashback rewards type stuff going on. But I remember when she came up with this idea, and it was nothing. And she's now raised $1 million, and she's got thousands and thousands of customers on this thing now. But this thing's changing the game in the way people are actually interacting with money. And the kids are learning from that. Do you reckon Elon Musk's going to change the game with his X? Do you reckon that's going to come over the top and scare us all?
I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, I've spent, as I mentioned before, I've had a lot of time working with North American companies, and I find it interesting that X is a huge product from a North American perspective. It doesn't have anywhere near the cut through in Australia that it does in North America. It definitely doesn't have the coverage through Asia that other solutions have. So I think I think there'll definitely be some things he expands it into. Whether that necessarily is a good thing or a bad thing, time will tell.
I think So I mean, obviously the technology has come a long way. Is there anything around the ethics side of stuff that you're seeing at the moment that needs to be looked at? I mean, everyone's got inside knowledge on things that are greenwashing, really. I mean, it's like they say they do this, but really it's just for the press. I see in my space, for example, a lot of companies that donate money to charities just to get the tick in the box. They don't really care. It's just a tax offset and it's a tick in the box. And I see that a lot, which is really annoying. But is there anything in your space that you're seeing around ethics in tech and social responsibility stuff?
Look, I think there's a lot of ingrained into the finance world. There's a really core. I think the key ethics is around the fact that we've got a lot of very personal information around people, and it kind of goes back to that compliance conversation we're having before. And as much as we need to validate who people are, we need to be very, very both ethical and socially responsible around the data we've got on people. And really be clear on how we secure those things, how we secure organizations. But then as a result of that, what that means for our customers as well. What that means, especially when we're dealing with other entities who are trying to deliver our service to sort of their customers, how those things will happen. Some of those are regulated for us, but I think kind of to the topic you were mentioning before around organizations who choose to do these things and promote them, but it's not really a core piece. Look, my opinion, I think we're about to go through a really interesting period of time in the next couple of years. What people perceived social responsibility to be only 24 months ago, I don't think is going to be the conversation we're having in 24 months. I think there's, Australia is a great case study on this, given our recent referendum, how that kind of translates to what both employees and organizations want to spend time and effort on, and what people expect social responsibility actually means. I think that pendulum can swing in a couple of different ways. But I do think people are very, very fervent about looking after everybody as equal, valuable people. But it's a hot topic at the moment, and I think it's a third rail at the moment. It's where all the power is, but if you put two hands on it, you can fry yourself. I think that's a challenge.
Well, I think it comes down to perception, right? That's a reality. We don't value things; we value their meaning. Really, yes. what the meanings are determined by or what things are determined by is the laws of physics, but what they mean are determined by the laws of psychology. And so I think human behavior and logic for me is mind-boggling. People don't do what they believe; they do what's convenient, and then they repent. And I don't think the human mind runs on logic any more than a horse runs on petrol. And what you see happening out there in the market and what people actually say they're going to do, they don't. And it's very bizarre. And like the old Henry Ford thing, if Henry Ford would have asked his customers, a faster horse kind of thing. So does that sort of human behavior?
I think Carl, I think behavior is a piece to think about. But the way I look at it is, I don't see technology being ethical or not. Technology is a tool. A weapon, a knife or a gun in itself is not ethical or unethical. If I use a weapon to harm you, it's unethical. If I use a weapon to harm you to protect my child, it's ethical. So I think, underneath that, it's about how do we use technology? How do we use it with knowledge of what the implications of that technology can be? And then as we're building technology, and maybe this kind of goes back to the X conversation. I mean, I think that's a really, really interesting one. And I'm a bit of a student of what's happening at the moment in the US. I think we're going through a real challenging time for world democracy right now. But I will not delve into that. But if you look at X as an example, as a deliverer of technology, if you fundamentally believe in freedom of speech, then you should be able to say what you want. And you should it on X however you want. However, there are many people that will say it was the right piece of social responsibility in order to have a whole bunch of people inside X whose job it was to moderate and monitor what people are putting on X. Does that make it? Look, I am not a scholar of ethical technology and social responsibility, but like there's arguments on both sides of that equation. And how do you make that work properly? I don't know.
Yeah, look, I mean, free speech is one thing, but then of course having Taylor Swift's pornographic images floated around is kind of, it's kind of hard to monitor all that and so on. But it's
I don't disagree. I don't disagree at all. But it then becomes where, and then you then come to the line of, and again, if you talk about the side of pornography and its transmission, like that case was actually dealt with is a great film if ever people want to go and watch it, which is The People versus Larry Flint. And that is Larry Flint, for those who don't know, was the owner of Penthouse magazine.
Yeah.
And that whole issue was, could he? And it wasn't about the pornography. It was he actually was alleged of slandering a minister in the US. Could he? And he put a picture of very rude picture of him in an outhouse, supposedly fornicating with his mother. And is that ethical or not? Or is it free speech and can he do it and can he not? But like, what's the line?
Yeah.
And now it's all going to, it's a really interesting topic to get into. And I think, back to your question earlier around, okay, we've got our kids. My daughter's 11, right? She's going to come through and inherit this world that we're building for her. And what do I want to leave for her? But I don't want to leave her in a world that's full of pornography or full of, poor technology and the fact that whatever she does is out there or her finances are insecure or any of those things. But by the same token, I definitely don't want her to live in an environment where her entire world is locked down either. So I think we're onus as leaders to try and manage this.
Yeah, I think I go back to always listening to very famous authors like Khalil Gibran, who's I think he's a Middle Eastern scholar, but he says that children don't belong to you; they come through you. And so I've always had this philosophy of I don't own my child. My job is to make her strong enough to be capable of doing things. So I've had that. I've sort of helped her become strong through that, and she's a fairly strong. She's 21 this next month and at uni in Queensland, and she's really had to be strong because dealing with those Queenslanders is a full-time job. Especially if you come from New South Wales. But she's now converted almost, but I think there's a lot to be said about that next generation coming through, and I think there's a lot of value in there. But I think they're caring. I think they really are. We talk about technology and using technology. I think they're using it at a point where, and this is what I think is going to happen. Prediction. So you've had generations like the millennials. They've now got kids who are Generation Alpha. And Generation Alpha are going to resent the fact that their parents were these social influencers putting their shit all over the internet.
Yeah.
And Generation Alpha are going to be the ones that pull back and go, enough. I don't want to put all my shit online. And so all of a sudden, I think it's going to be that generation that will actually be a tipping point. And so we've got to prepare ourselves as technology companies to cater with that, because what is it going to be? Because, the Gen Zs, well, they're sort of in between millennials and the alphas. So that's going to be a really, and you look at the demographics at the moment and what's happening in the schools, the lack of, it's crazy with these kids, the way they're teaching the no respect or whatever for authority.
Yeah.
That's a result of the training that they've had from the parents.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to change once the Gen Alphas come into play.
We're already seeing that in technology now. I mean, we've gone from the model of just to give an example in kind of how social media has changed over time, right? So one of the first products that I sold when I joined Salesforce was a social media monitoring tool. And part of that was the fact that social media back in kind of 2012 to sort of 16 was pretty much open. So when you posted on any platform, Twitter or Facebook, whatever, they were open environments. Then they became what's called walled gardens. So they closed down in order to be able to effectively own the content. Now, that model of them owning the content is being significantly pushed back. And now all of that stuff is now moving to a point where you as a publisher start to own the content. The fact that we're on a podcast right now is a really key example of that, right? So, you and I wouldn't have a podcast. You wouldn't have a podcast 20 years ago. You had to go to a television show. I had to go to a television station. So, media's been democratized, and the best content available now. I mean, I get my best content and news from channels that I validate and I respect and I've researched on YouTube or on Spotify, because I'm actually getting access. I mentioned earlier that I'm a bit of a student at the moment of what's happening in the US, and I've found it super interesting listening to the first-hand sources of people who were actually involved in the January 6 riots and gave advice to. There's a particular former federal judge who has done a whole heap of podcasts, but he talked personally about the advice that he gave to Pence on January 5th. That's first-hand source. Whereas, years ago we were, it was a reporter talking about what happened rather than the thinking of people actually in that environment. But that's an example of how technology is dramatically changing how people think about things, how we use it, how organizations ingest it, how our kids are going to involve. But I mean, that's always been technology's role.
Yeah, totally.
If you think back as simple as, one of the most impactful pieces of technology, I mean, the two most impactful pieces of technology in human history, or three: the wheel, the Gutenberg Bible being the first book, and the spinning wheel, which drove the Industrial Revolution. Like, they changed society, and technology and apps and bitcoins and fintechs are all changing the way that organizations and people are going to live tomorrow, and our kids will live in a different world to what we experience, and it will change faster than we thought possible.
Well, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 54, and I can still remember people getting shouted at for walking down the street with a mobile phone to their ear, getting called a wanker because they had a mobile phone and nobody else had them, right? And I remember that. I can remember as far back as before Starbucks, and nobody ever said, I want to go and take a coffee and walk around the streets and pay $4.50 for a coffee. Nobody ever said that when we were growing up, because takeaway coffees were unheard of. And but now it's like simple stuff, right?
That's it.
Technology, where it's going. I mean, I love the AI pin. I think that's a cool idea where you can put your screen up on it. Get rid of the phone. Neuralink's coming. There's all this technology coming. Where does that have a role in social impact? It's amazing stuff.
There's an amazing piece of tech I saw the other day, which is, if anyone wants to search this out, this is just amazing. See where it is, because this is where you bring all these pieces into your real world. A guy learning to fix his own car while wearing see-through VR goggles, which allowed him to be able to have the up on the screen so that he can see the engine of the car, while on the right-hand side he's got 3 pages virtually through the goggles, where he's got the manual of what he needs to do, a live YouTube video of someone actually teaching him how to do it, and then somebody else actually in a live piece training him how to. That's changing the world. Like, that's a completely different way of existing. I can't even comprehend that.
That's hectic, right? I mean, I've just literally had a podcast with Bernard. Bernard Wansink, I think his surname. I keep saying Wozniak for some reason, but it's Bernard Wansink. He's the CTO of the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine. And some of the things that he was telling me on this podcast that we just done, literally an hour ago, around being able to do virtual autopsies based on data and this sort of stuff. You weren't thinking about that 10 years, not even 5 years ago. It's crazy the way it's all gone. I mean, it's not just about a virtual autopsy is very different, but it's all around the data, and it's all around the tech and what's available out there today. And I think we're living in really exciting times. That somebody once said to me, anything that's invented when you're 0 to 15 years of age is new. Anything that's invented when you're 15 to 35 is exciting. Anything that's invented after you're 35 is against the grain. So if you're over 35, when I got to 35 and I tried to pick up those PS4, PlayStation fucking games and whatever, and trying to play them, forget it, because it's just not.
I get it, mate. Look, I'm 43, right? And I don't understand Snapchat. I don't get it. It makes no sense to me. Like, that's just, it's the one piece of technology I just am blown away by.
My 20-year-old just spent a month at home from Queensland. So she's up at uni up there. She come home for Christmas and New Year. She sat here. I swear to God, every single bit of communication that they do is on Snapchat. It is like a quick 2-second video, and you see the top of their head, and they go, "Yeah, I'm just at home complaining with my dad, blah 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 blah," and they're sharing their stuff. But the thing that's really interesting is that they are all sharing their location on Snap Maps. So they all know. So whenever she goes traveling, she knows exactly where her friends are. They're all sharing their location on Find My now. So they know, and they're doing it from a safety perspective as well. So they're already there. They're already there doing the stuff that we should be thinking about, right? And that's just going to keep getting better and better and evolve over time, which I find it really exciting to watch these kids and the way they take on tech.
But I kind of think, you say about social impact, right? I'm 43, mate. I wouldn't want my parents to know where I was or anyone else to know when I was 17 to 20. Like, I wanted to be able to leave the house and disappear into the black world, right? And then pop up sometime for dinner or at some future date.
Yeah, my parenting style was very liberal because I grew up as pretty poor, and we go out to the rave clubs, pop a couple of pills, and dance all night as teenagers, right? That's what. You'd be off your nana for God knows how long, and this is just the way we grew up as kids. It's not. I don't do it now. I've not done it for years, but that's how we were. I mean, we were told. Let's have a think about this for a second. Don't do drugs. Don't talk to strangers. Don't go into strangers' houses. And what are we doing now? Well, we're advocating that you can take drugs because you can do medical marijuana. You can do microdosing with mushrooms. And now they're talking about ketamine to help you in. They're talking about using ket for medicinal purposes. It's like these kids are on this at the raves right now. They're on the ket. They're on, and this. So and now all of a sudden, we order a stranger to come and pick us up in his car, and we go and rent their house out.
100%. I mean, and this is how do we deal with those things again? Mate, if the stuff that I did when I was younger, mate, if we went through the list of it, I'd probably never get another job. But it's this. Now I feel sorry for kids that not only you mentioned it earlier, right? Not only are their lives recorded forever on social media and all this type of stuff, but where they're going, who they're with, what they're doing is being ingested into a database somewhere that they don't know about. Snapchat and Instagram and other keeping track of them, Google, etc. They've got no idea where that data is going to be used or will be used in the future. I don't like when I go overseas and all of a sudden I go to a brand new country for the first time and great, here's another country with my fingerprints. Fantastic. And it's not that I'm out to go and commit crime, but I don't know where that data is going to be at some point in time in the future and who's going to use it for nefarious purposes, right? We talk about data breaches and this type of stuff, right? I don't want the Thai government having a copy of my fingerprints.
I think one of the things I think about a lot is how the kids are today, and they don't really care too much about the things that we're doing as parents, and you can see this in the reduction of alcohol consumption amongst those young ones. They don't drink as much. They're not drinking, and part of the reason, the psychology behind that, is because they know that their shit's being recorded 24 hours and uploaded every 5 seconds. And so they're afraid of being really drunk and out of control on social media. So that psychologically is part of the reason why alcohol consumption is going down. Conversely, of course, they're all out at the raves, popping pills and on the MDMA and everything else and having a great time. So logically, as a government, what you should be doing, this is just my opinion, is testing those pills at those clubs. Give the kids a bit of safety, because there's a whole lot of people out there making them doing whatever else. You can't stop it. Just like you couldn't stop cigarettes, just like you can't stop the vaping, just like you can't stop the drugs. How about you just give them a bit of safety and a bit of security around what they're taking is okay? Because that, I remember, this is a really, really cool thing for me. And I often say, when I was growing up as a kid, it was pretty rough. My dad was a son of a coal miner. He was a roof tiler, really rough as guts. And, he'd take me working with him, carrying roof tiles up on the ladder. And, if you were seen and not heard, you get a punch in the head if you said the wrong thing. It was tough. And we were basically raised that way as I've lost my train of thought, but we were raised that way as, the parents thought it was okay. And the problem is today we've got governments and industry leaders that are trying to create solutions that are solving problems that they don't even know about. So you start looking at, some of what the government's policies are around certain things. It's nothing more than regulatory capture. You talk about the US and what they're doing with regulatory capture. AI, you talk about policy and regulations. You've got these government influencers from the corporates that are going to try and trying to encourage policy to be that policy and that regulation is not to protect the kids, it's to protect the revenues of the incumbent.
Yeah, that I agree 100%.
No regulation 100%. Has come in. So I'm starting to think, well, at what point do the leaders start doing things that are actually protecting the kids and actually helping the kids rather than protecting the coffers of the incumbents?
And not just the kids. And we see this across so much of the markets today, which is, and look, fintech is, certainly back to what we kind of all do, but how do you open up the doors for innovation? How do you allow organizations to try and test markets and work out different ways of doing it? If you're talking about the health market, okay, how do we run trials that, maybe this is a little bit different to what we all thought was ethical. But again, back to my example before, I can use a gun to be ethical or unethical. So how do I deal with that? I can drive a car to save someone's life over the speed limit to get to the hospital, but I can also drive a car over the speed limit and kill someone in the vehicle. Yeah. Which one's unethical, right? So I think there's some really key pieces around this in terms of how do we allow organizations and people to be flexible and push the edges, but also look at what good it delivers to the world, right?
This is the behavioral science, Dan, and the unfortunate fact is we've got logical scientists running the country, people that think they know what they're doing, but often the opposite of a good idea is another good idea, right? I mean, let's take, for example, this whole vaping bollocks that everyone's on about at the moment. They're talking about banning flavors in the UK. Flavors. I mean, the reality is people go and vape because they want to stop smoking, right? And so what they're doing is they're putting people that vape outside with the smokers. Well, what's the logic behind that? Because that's really, that's like putting someone that's trying to stop drinking in the pub,
the alcoholics.
That's like trying to hold an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in the pub. It's like, well, you're putting these people that are trying to quit smoking out with the smokers, which is actually going to make them want to smoke again, and you're stopping them from having their grape flavor, and you're only going to mandate tobacco flavor. Well, that's the whole reason why they're moving away from cigarettes in the first place. It's like, why are they? What are these leaders thinking?
Yeah, exactly.
And this is what I think about. It's the behavioral science behind the use of tech, the use of all of these new apps that we've got coming, and the stuff that you're doing. I think it's really exciting of where it's all going. I really do, and I think the leaders are going to be the ones that innovate fast. And what you're doing is in that space, right? It's up to you to create the change. I love it.
Absolutely,
mate. It's 4:00. We've chatted for an hour, isn't it? Meant to be half an hour.
We've chatted for an hour. It's always good fun, mate. I've enjoyed the chat.
Yeah, me too, Dan. And thanks for coming on board. We'll just cut it up, and there's a lot of little snippets in there that I think are great, and we'll put that on our platform. And by the way, your team, sounds like you got a pretty big team or a pretty big group of employees at SendPayments now. You're actually the perfect target market for our clients who want to come and have a conversation, right? They are all the best leaders in data science, analytics, tech, the whole thing. So you can learn from them, absolutely. But conversely, all of your leaders, all of your CTOs, CIOs, and etc. that you've got, I noticed there's quite a few in your team. they should all become they should all get on the platform and pick a charity, and let's get send.
Oh, look,
let's
mate, we actually, for me, there's an opportunity both ways, right? So, our play is to really get into a lot of who are your customers today.
Right.
Why are you, don't worry about running your FX payments, Wes Farmers through Westpac Bank. Let's build you a facility that actually allows you to do it and ingest it. Or, here's an opportunity for you to go out and build a travel card. We facilitate all that for you, whether it's white labeled or whatever that may be. Like this, there's huge opportunities for us as well, back both ways. So that was hence part of the reason why I was really keen to come in and talk to you.
Yeah, well, let's get Paddington, Potts Point. I'm off the booze. I do 100 days dry from January the 1st to April. My missus is running the marathon, so we're all in. That's why I'm buff as hell, because I've not been drinking and I'm working out. I shouldn't look this good at 54, but I feel really good. I always get a nice mental reset. But let's catch up, because
for sure
we've got a lot of clients. I mean, we're talking about Bupa and AGL and those sorts of companies that are probably doing a lot of that stuff, right?
Absolutely. They'd be key targets for us, yeah.
And they're all looking at innovation. It's part of their job. It's what they have to do. And the thing about Meet Magic is we give the execs a chance to see the latest in tech and what problems are being solved and how it's working and transforming industries. That's huge, powerful knowledge that you can take and use to adapt your own business. And so, and it's free for the execs. No charge.
Perfect. Mate, well, listen, I do have to run. I've got another meeting coming up. So, mate, thanks so much for your time, Carl. Appreciate leading me on the podcast.
Have a great weekend, Dan.
Thanks, mate. See ya. Bye.
Bye.